Good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of the Sydney Saxophone Network Q&A sessions. I hope everyone's had a lovely week and weekend, and hopefully you're getting a lot of fresh air, particularly our friends in Melbourne who are now able to run out and about a little bit more freely now. So thinking of you guys down there for sure. Now, this evening we're joined by a very, very, very wonderful saxophone clarinetist and composer, and just all-round musician, just a wonderful musician and a wonderful person too. She is a prolific performer and composer, as I said before. She has worked with the likes of Orchestra Victoria as a principal clarinetist, associate principal clarinetist with the Australian Opera and Ballet Orchestra, associate principal clarinetist with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and Sydney Chamber. And with chamber music, she's worked with such renowned groups such as Continuum Sax, the Seymour Group, and Sonic Art Ensemble. She is doing lots and lots of amazing things still, and lots of teaching as well on top of all the other wonderful things that he does. I'm just going to stop rambling because I hadn't really planned that introduction, sorry Marge, but without further ado, I'd just like to introduce Dr. Margery Smith.
Thanks Nathan, and welcome everybody who's out there. Great to be here and to share some of my life, and hopefully stories that maybe you can take away and think, oh yes, I can do that too, you know. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, do you mind if I call you Marge? Just because
Marge is good.
Is that okay? Just because I've known you for a while, and it just seems a bit strange.
It's Marge, Nathan.
Thanks, Marge. Okay, so we'll just start with a bit of an icebreaker. Could you tell us how you got into playing the saxophone? Was it a natural progression from the clarinet, or is it something else that sort of sparked your curiosity to the instrument?
Well, I started off on clarinet.
Yes.
Mainly because, like many, the school had clarinets, and I just ended up with one in my hands. But and I started I would have started quite a bit later than what people do now. So I was in year 7 when I started playing the clarinet, and I think like you have your dreams, and even then when I was in the middle of tune a day, I thought, oh wow, this is so amazing. And somehow in the middle of tune a day, I had this feeling inside of me that I knew how music works somehow. You know, there was like some realization at a really basic level. But as I went through high school, I just wanted to play the saxophone. Like, it was so like lots of kids, it was just such a cool instrument. But I didn't actually get one. I didn't save up enough until I left high school, and I started at the Conservatorium, and at Sydney Con I actually did it as a second study for quite a while. And it was in those days. So we're talking fairly ancient history here. We're talking, so I embarrassingly, I totted up as, how long have I been a musician for? And I thought, well, if I count when I got my first work, I've been over 40 years. So,
wow.
So it is ancient history, mate. Yep. And times were so much different, and there wasn't the like, I think of students now, and there are so many resources out there that you can tap into. And and my family was supportive of my music, but no one knew anything about music in my family. Mm-hmm. And so I often had that feeling that I was just really working in the dark, you know, even with things like really basic stuff like rhythms and just fingerings, and just, you know, like it was really quite hard. So I used to go and have my clarinet lessons in Parramatta. Mm-hmm. and I learnt from this lovely Maltese gentleman called Joseph Darmanin. Okay. And every week he used to write out my lessons in little manuscript books. So I had 2 little manuscript books, and he took away one of them, and he wrote, and and I've still got them, you know, and he wow. wrote my lessons out. So I didn't actually have a book or anything. And when I look what he used to give me, like I was about grade 4 and I was going up to high G's, you know, and stuff.
Wow.
So he wrote me they were quite challenging lessons. Oh, crikey, did I do that? You know, it was like, wow. But he was a really, but really I didn't really have very good teaching, you know, and by the time I got to Sydney Con, I just had heaps of enthusiasm and you know, just lots of bad habits to fix up, and which I was lucky because I had John St George as my clarinet teacher, and he was absolutely fabulous at sorting people out with embouchures and tonguing and all that stuff. So it was a very but you know, like I harbored this dream inside myself that I wanted to play the clarinet somehow, and then saxophone came into it as well, and so I just like Neville Thomas was at the con when I was there, and they always really encourage you to play other instruments as well. So I used to play the bassoon a bit, and what else did I do? Oh, flute, I was hopeless at that. I was just, but I loved mucking around on other instruments, and so saxophone became, and then I used to do lots of shows, which earned me money when I was a student. And of course, you know, you had to double. So saxophone was there, and I'd bludge a tenor saxophone when I needed it from somebody, and you know, like I had my first alto was a power tone alto. It was pretty a horrible instrument. It was pretty vile, but you know, I loved it. I loved playing the saxophone, and I think one of the things that really attracted me was the saxophone could do so many different kinds of music, and that was kind of what the magic of it was. You know, it was this wonderful flexible instrument that could just make all these sounds. I mean, the clarinet can too, but the saxophone just has this other whole repertoire that it can do, and it's such a fabulous instrument, and I loved it dearly. But you know, when I was doing saxophone, classical saxophone was just, it wasn't anything like what you guys had when you were at the con. You know, it was once again it was like groping around in the dark and trying to figure things out for yourself a lot of the time. So anyway.
Yeah, no, interesting.
That's a long-winded answer.
No, that's great. I should have actually specified at the start, sorry, that of course you are a fabulous clarinetist, but
but this is a saxophone thing.
Yeah, it's a saxophone chat. But I mean, I don't mind if you mention the clarinet. We have nothing against the clarinet at all. No, I'm joking. I'm loving the clarinet as well. Now it's curious you mentioned that, because we were talking to Mark Walton a couple of weeks ago, and he was sort of talking about the same thing, how it's sort of like that course during that time at the con, it was sort of a bit like a choose your own adventure kind of thing, because there was no precedent and no sort of framework for a classical saxophone degree. And that leads in really nicely with my next question, where we maybe can talk about your university studies and with the clarinet and saxophone, and maybe talking about some of your early teachers at the con, and maybe beyond the con, because I understand that from the con you actually went overseas and got some extra study with some prominent players like Eugene Russo and Henry Bock. So maybe talk us through some of those experiences and sort of things you learned along the way there.
Well, very much. I mean, I just think I'm really lucky with the opportunities that I've had. But again, it was just kind of, we need a saxophone player. And so, I've got a saxophone, I'll do it, you know, and it was everything was very much like that in those days, you know, right. And because, you know, I was an experienced orchestral player, you know, I used to do all the saxophone work in the SSO, and I even did it in the opera too. And sometimes I'd double. I remember there was a French opera I played that had a huge saxophone obbligato and cadenza in it, and when I was there with Richard Bonning, and it was double. It was written into the clarinet part, so people must have doubled on it to do it, you know. And so very much it was just like being that person there at the time and getting those opportunities. But I quickly realised and then started, so I'm talking dark ages here, you know, just even being able to hear recordings of things was really hard. Like when LP technologies were there, it was really hard to get to get even clarinet records, let alone saxophone ones, classical saxophone ones. So
yeah, it's quite a niche.
Yeah. So when I started listening to other performers, like John Hall was a player that I heard at a conference in London, and he really set off the light bulbs, showing what that instrument could do, because he's such a strong, charismatic performer. So he was kind of one of my very first saxophone idols, that I listened to. And then it was just like, get my hands on everything else I can possibly find to listen to. So I've always been one to listen a lot. So I listen a lot to find the sound that I love. That's a big part. I mean, eventually everybody develops their own sound, their own personal sort of sound, but you've got to get that concept in your head about it. And so listening heaps is the way to do that, and to find, you get that aha moment. Oh, that's so good, I just want to sound like that. It's that kind of feeling. And when I was teaching, I'd always be pushing my students to find that place, and to find it so that they were talking with their eyes shining. That was you're really excited about what you've listened to, that this is something that I can aspire to. And so that got me going, thinking about more serious study. And one of the first places I went was, I spent a little time in Bloomington, Indiana, where Eugene Rousseau was teaching. And that was pretty cool, actually, because there was the whole lineage that he came from, and that was very Marcel Mule, and it was
that was French school almost.
Yeah, really, that French school, and I got the feeling of that, and I did basic repertoire with him. They had practice rooms there. I just go and practice all day, and then I'd go and have lessons with Rousseau, and he'd write everything down in a book for me. And also, like, it was kind of weird going to have lessons, because at that time I was already like working as a professional player. Like I was already a clarinetist, and oftentimes I think teachers didn't quite know what to do with me, because I obviously had a lot of experience, but I needed to get saxophone chops, and that was but it was just this kind of really weird sort of bipolar sort of thing, and I think the thing maybe in that time that I was at Bloomington, the best thing that happened there was just hanging out with all of his with Rousseau's postgrad students. And like going bowling with them and having beers with them, and as students do,
just having a hang.
And they were so generous. Like, they just took me along to everything. Come on, Marge, let's go. And I couldn't even bowl the bowling ball down the thing and hit any skittles whatsoever, but they still let me come, and it was just talking to them, and Rousseau let me sit in on all their lessons, and I've soaken it in like a sponge, and it made such a difference. And he set me up with a proper mouthpiece. Like, I didn't even know what mouthpiece to play on, it was very, very very hard, coming from Australia and not knowing all this stuff. But anyway, he really did sort me out, and after that it was more just going like I went to Henri Bock, and he's a really lovely teacher, very supportive. We did a lot of repertoire. We did we looked at just playing contemporary music, and he was interesting because there's that doubling thing on bass clarinet and saxophone rather. So that was a really cool thing, and his model of getting a group together. So he worked in a duo situation most of the time, and just the way that he organized, like he developed repertoire for that. So maybe that, that's those ideas for the future came from seeing Henri working and getting his very own repertoire for his group, which was quite unique, because it was always usually with a percussionist. and as a result, there's this fantastic repertoire for that ensemble. You know, there's probably hundreds of pieces that he commissioned.
Yeah, and quite a few Australian works as well, I understand.
Yeah, he was really keen on commissioning Australian work. So he was a lovely influence. I really enjoyed working my time, and I also had lessons with another of his colleagues at Rotterdam called Tom de Vet, who was a really so from everybody you go to, you just it's probably been the same for you. You get different you just get different ideas from everybody, and especially to do with music. So I think that was kind of that they were really important early teachers for me. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. But I think just when you sent me all the sort of areas you wanted to cover, and I was thinking, you know, like things have changed so much in the last, you know, since I was a student, you know, and it's just so different. It's better.
Yeah, it's a different world because I mean, and I'm no disrespect in any way, but when you were sort of back then studying everything like that, the world it seemed like such a distance from everything, and it was really hard to get bits and pieces of information. Whereas now, you know, you just do a Google search and you have access to all this information that was so hard to come by back in the day. Like, you know, things like finding out what would be a good mouthpiece and all that stuff.
Yeah. That it was so hard. I mean, you couldn't buy, you know, I went to the shop in Sydney and they had Meyer mouthpieces, you know, that was it. I mean, they're really great mouthpieces, but not for classical, you know. It's like, but I think, and when I got a proper saxophone, it was a Selmer Mark 6. I had a lovely old Selmer Mark 6. I'm sorry I sold it, actually. Would have been a good investment.
I know, right? Those things just keep getting better with age.
Yeah. But I think, it is a very, very different time, but it's kind of good to have that, you know, looking back and then seeing where we are now, and you know how things are hard now, but they're also quite amazing as well. You know, it's
different challenges, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, no, fascinating. Now, out of those early sort of lesson experiences, and you know, just sort of getting your sort of first-hand saxophone lessons and mentoring and whatnot. Okay, I'll even extend this to like clarinet as well. But in terms of like lessons and teachers and things like that, were there any particular educational experiences that you had that stuck out in your mind as being like a pivotal light bulb or eureka moment in terms of your musical identity or your musical development?
Interesting question. I think I've been very lucky in my life to always go to teachers that encourage me to find my own voice in my music. So I think like you know, when you're teaching a student, you kind of gauge your teaching to very much the way the student learns. So some students you've got to be pretty gentle with and encouraging, and other ones you maybe need to like just, you know, put them in their place a little bit, you know, and be a bit harder. And they respond well to that. Like everybody responds in a different way. And I probably am one of those students that responds better to the encouragement and support and mentoring. And so that was kind of my experience with my teachers. Like I always had teachers that kind of believed in me. And I think like that, like in an overall like general thing, I think that probably is this really significant thing is that if you believe in yourself, you can be as good as you're going to get, you know, like I think that's and it's a very delicate balance with students, and I know with myself, like it could easily have got tipped the other way and I lose all my confidence and just kind of go nowhere, you know, and just get discouraged and give up. So it's that kind of thing that really helped me with my and I was lucky to have really fine teachers, you know, that on clarinet too. I went to New York to study with Leon Rushinoff, who was an absolutely fabulous teacher. It was amazing, just amazing. And so kind of all those experiences all just come together, and you know, they knit you together, you know, to make the person who you are. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Now, just a bit of a side question, but an important one, of course. Now, in terms of your musical influences, now you, for lack of a better word, have quite an eclectic taste in music. You so grab inspiration from all sorts of genres and whatnot. What are some of your biggest musical influences in your sort of career that you've sort of really clung on to, or sort of made an impact on your say playing performance style, or the choice of repertoire you do, or even your compositional influences?
Well, I think one of the musical personalities that I really admire and aspire to is Sandy Evans.
Yep.
She is such a great, well, she's a fabulous saxophonist, but she's also like this amazing human being, and she is the most fantastic musician. Like I think for my career, I mean, I've had all those big jobs, you know, and I walked away from them, and people go, "Why did you do that?" You know, but I think the thing is that you that human beings are creative, and you need to find, and for some people, you just need to find like an avenue where you can do that. And someone like Sandy Evans seems to have that kind of balance in her career, where she's got this incredible creative output, but also working. And she's also, the other thing I admire about Sandy too is she's built like she's built her life around musicians that she loves to work with. And I think very much that's always been my ethos too, is if you're going to make music with people, you've got to get on musically, and you've got to get on personally as well. And there's got to be some kind of rapport, just like you have with Nexus. I mean, you know, that it's kind of, I mean, you don't always agree all the time, but there's always that rapport within the group, and a commitment to the shared values of the group, which is why a lot of groups do fall apart, you know, that they get so far and they can be on the cusp of, you know, really things happening, and then suddenly it just all busts up, and it's, you know, and it's because people don't always have the same commitment to the project, you know, that others have. So I think she's got to be one of my really big influences. There are many clarinets players I admire, but certainly John Hull was, you know, like that first really early influence. And the thing I like too about his playing, apart from, you know, wanting to be as brilliant as him, but he really mixed up his genres. Like he kind of cut a path between classical and more contemporary styles. So I like that, and I like the repertoire that he played, and so I think that was like he's got to be a pretty formative influence for me. And then of course there's, you know, Murray Bay, and you know, all those wonderful musicians that you just think, oh wow, you know, they're just like another level. But anyway, yeah. But you know, and like I also really admire what all of my colleagues are doing, you know, like Jim and Martin, and you know, that and what you guys are doing, you know, like I just think there's plenty of good stuff to go around, and there are you know, we're gifted with so many wonderful players in Sydney that that can inspire us in so many ways, you know.
No, it's quite a great community, and it'd be great.
It's very supportive, isn't it? And
I think it'd be great to, you know, catch up with everyone again.
But
things are starting to pick up again. So, but anyway, I digress. Cool. All right. So moving on, just in terms of your sort of your early days, in terms of your performing. Now, you mentioned you had you got quite a few gigs, like doing some shows and orchestral playing. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these opportunities, like how they came about? Was it right place at the right time, or did you go out and network with people and kind of get your way in there? Or how did some of these sort of early gig opportunities come about for you?
Well, I was brazen. I mean,
okay.
I rang up Australian Opera and Ballet Orchestra. Can I come and have an audition? It's like, you know, it was, so I was really brazen, and I just would go and do things, even though probably there was no, like, probably it was a bit stupid, but but I mean, it was just being brazen, and I think too, like, if you did get a break, it was really important to just make sure that you fitted in with everybody, and people liked working with you. I think that's like, I remember one bassoon player I played next to, he said, "Oh, you just got to sit there and not smell and don't pick your nose," you know. It was that kind of, it was just kind of that kind of it makes it sound a bit silly, but it is kind of like about that as well. It's so always being willing to try things, and then you know, like one gig can lead to another gig, and it's and as a freelance player, it's hard to say no to anything, because you might not get asked again. You know, that's always a risk with things. So you end up with 10, you know, 15 gigs in a week or something stupid. but I think it's very much that is just, don't be afraid to just put yourself out there and say, can I do this? And when I was, after I finished my orchestral jobs, I used to really look out for when the shows were coming, and I'd find out who the MD was, and then I'd get in touch with them and say, I'm available. You know, you've got nothing to lose. So I used to actively go looking for work, and then the other part of it was like just generating your own work and finding concert opportunities for yourself, and I think there's probably a lot more, like in those days you could pretty much ring up the ABC and say, can I come and do a recording? You know, it was they had money to do that then, which they don't now. So there were probably other opportunities that weren't around. There were lots more sessions that I used to do. But all of those things too, it's like being flexible, being able to play. Yes, I can do bass clarinet. Or where do I get one from? You know, it's that kind of, you just say yes to everything and give it a go. And that's kind of what got me going, I think, was I just turned up and auditioned, and then someone liked it and they rang me up for casual work, and then it was like, you know. So it is just kind of being confident in yourself, and I think really wanting to do it, you know, really like I super wanted to make my life as a performer, and that energy just kept me going.
No, for sure. And there's something to be said about being proactive and you know, going out there and, you know, letting people know, hey, I'm here to do this, I can do this, or whatever. And you're spot on in terms of having that passion and drive to continually do that throughout the course of your career. It's not an easy thing, that's for sure. But really having that passion helps. Cool. All right. Now, just a bit of a question regarding your advice in terms of maybe young musicians now, or recent graduates, or people at the start of their careers looking to make their way in music in this day and age. What sort of advice would you give to someone wanting to make a career out of music performance these days?
I think you've got to be really flexible especially like during now, where live performances, you know, really copped it severely. Like, it's a bit tragic what's happened, but we have to keep looking for opportunities and looking for things around that. I think looking at bimodal ways of presenting things. So you might have an online thing, but it's also a live thing at the same time. Just finding opportunities for you to play. Like I think think, and it's probably still true now, if you earn your bread and butter money from something, might be teaching, might be doing a show or whatever, but then your special work generally is subsidized by the other. And I think most artists probably work like that a bit. You know, if you look at the, you know, the reward in terms of the effort you put in, you're probably putting in like heaps of effort for your own projects and like everything you've got basically, you know, killing yourself, and then making your money from other things that don't take up quite as much time and energy. So I think it's like looking for those opportunities and finding people to work with, thinking of I guess those kind of spatial works might be good now with social distancing.
I think they're all the rage at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But I think there's going to be that bimodal thing, and I can actually, and the other thing too, like one silver lining of COVID could be that there's more opportunities for local musicians now because overseas is cut off.
Yep.
So could be that we all get a bit more of a go than we have in the past. So there could be opportunities coming up. So I guess it's just looking for those times that you can take advantage of something, you know. But it is hard. It is hard. I think it's a very difficult time we're in. Yeah, not easy. I don't know. Have you found anything that's been working for you?
Look, if I had the answer, I would have shared it with everyone.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
but you're kind of right. Like you kind of, I think the best thing you can do is just be adaptable and kind of work around with the current situation, and just be on the lookout for opportunities. And as you were saying before, like if something comes along, or if an idea or a colleague has something in mind, just say yes and give it a go. And
absolutely. Yeah.
I know it's a tough one, but
it's tough. Yeah, it is tough. Yep.
Now, on a lighter note, I'd like to talk about some of your round shiny things, which are your CDs. Now, for the younger viewers, CDs were a thing back in the day. This is after the LPs, and you have several CDs floating around, including a really album that I enjoyed quite a lot, and I still have in my collection, is Viva Sax. And I was just wondering if you talk through this particular album in terms of the musical concept and how it came about, and how you got all these different composers to contribute works to this album.
Well, a lot of it was just taking advantage of opportunities that came. So the concerto that I recorded, where I played all those instruments, that was a Seymour Group commission, and so when I did it, it was all all sort of happened at the same time. So again, it was, you know, just taking advantage of things that were happening at that time. And basically I thought of like developing Australian repertoire, and like think back again, this is fairly early days, and it was, and there was Australian repertoire that hadn't been recorded, like the Sutherland Saxophone Sonata, and it was great to kind of bring those pieces to life, and the Dulcie Holland one, which, you know, they're fine works in their own right, and it was good to kind of document those, and I think that was really my whole reason was to find this Australian saxophone music and you know, promote it. That was what I wanted to do with it, and then I was really lucky to just have great collaborations like working with Daniel Haskovich on piano, and you know, that was another like very precious relationship. Like I loved playing with Danny. You know, he was ruthless. Like he just used to tell me off all the time, you know, but he was a magical collaborator. You know, musically we just, you know, it was fabulous. Working with Daryl Pratt, just the opportunity to work with a musician of that caliber. So I kind of, you know, like it was, who do I want to work with, you know, and it was very much like just finding opportunities that I could do to create these things. And in those days too, making a CD was a bit of a big deal then, and you could get funding to do it. So, you know, I got an Australia Council funding grant to do it, and it paid for all the recordings, and it commissioned a new piece from Roger Frampton. And so I just kind of used, you know, I created opportunities for myself to do this dream. And Belinda Webster supported the project. She liked the saxophone, luckily, and so it was very much just going out and finding those possibilities and taking advantage of them. But my whole idea behind it was Australian. I wanted to create some new repertoire, and I also wanted to show the repertoire that already existed. So yeah, that was basically it, really.
No, that's cool.
And then a chance for Marge to have a good time.
That's great. And a lot of works on that album are still very much underrated. And, you know, I think there's definitely a lot more scope for those works to be played. A lot more, for sure. Now, speaking of collaborating with musicians, there's one very important collaboration I should mention in terms of the role you have in the saxophone community and the impact you've had on it. And that was your work with a particular ensemble called Continuum Sax, which was, you know, it is still currently one of the premier saxophone quartets in Australia, and their musical output has had a huge contribution to the development and the promotion of saxophone quartet as a medium, and, you know, boosting the repertoire, and, you know, commissioning some very hefty Australian composers to write for the group, and of course giving you an outlet to express some of your compositions as well. Could you tell us a little bit about how the group came about, like the inception behind it?
We started at Sydney Con, and there was a first iteration in the late 1990s, and then I went away for a while, and then it's when I went to England, I think. And then when I came back, we wanted to start a sax. I think it was me and Martin, and we wanted to reform, and that was kind of how it started. And then, because Jim was there, and Jared on baritone, you know, that. So it was, and there was. They had their own saxophone quartet as students at the con. There was, and I can't quite remember who else was in it, but anyway, we sort of joined forces, and that was how. And Continuum it started off always wanting to play Australian repertoire, and our first CD was just that. It was commissioning works, and I just started getting into composing by then, and so I wrote a little piece for it as well. And really, I think at the time, it was a time when composer performer ensembles were really, that model of a group was really sort of coming to fruition, and there was some Topology is another group where I would. You know, that what they do is really interesting, and they've built their whole, you know, their whole group is built around their own. It's sort of like a rock band model, but it's in classical. It's more classical, but with influences from lots of different kinds of music as well. And I'd say Continuum was similar in that way, but we also had, you know, we paid respect to the great repertoire as well, you know, that existed. But our main thing really was to find Australian music for the group, and to create that, and gradually that evolved. So Martin started composing. Improvisation became more of a feature of the language of the group, and we all improvised in different ways, and I think that was sort of it was kind of that. There was a time when that way of music was really was really coming to the fore. So it all has to do, I think, a little bit with so as a classical, so I've trained mostly as a classical player, and I think one of the things that you find with classical music is that you know, the music's written and it's somebody else's music, and you're interpreting somebody else's music, and it's like classical musicians taking back that power again of having our own voice and our own music to support who we are. I think is probably what drove me in the ensemble as much, and I think that would be true of some of the others as well. Perhaps not to the same extent, but it was a great ensemble to work in. Just in the and it's a good example of, and surely you would find the same thing, like working with Nexus. Like over time, you just develop like a shared vocabulary together, and then it allows more music to come out because you kind of know you have this sixth sense about what each other's going to do, and so it creates like a much more spontaneous, you know, thing of the moment when you're performing together. So and then the other thing that really motivated Continuum was like expanding the role of the saxophone. So hence we created all these collaborative opportunities with different musicians, and that was a really big part of like our concept as a group was to because classical saxophone has its own little world, and
sure
we wanted to kind of like bust out of that and find other ways to show what the saxophone could do. I think that was a really big part, and we were very lucky just working with so many different collaborators and opportunities that came up.
Right.
Yeah.
So Mick Didge, I believe, was one I recall.
Yeah.
And that was quite a fascinating collaboration because you had this very unique, you know, mix of tone colors from the group, and having them interwoven within the sounds of the didgeridoo. And yeah, I just remember being quite mesmerized with that concept when you first did it.
Yeah, I must say I'm really proud of that piece because the whole concept of the piece was looking at the different ways sounds are produced on the saxophone. So percussive sounds, the multiphonics, the and then finding parallels within the world of the didge. So it was like we were just kind of coming together. And when we performed the piece, it was a spatial piece, and we all stood at the four corners of the room, and Mick was on the stage, and gradually we would move towards Mick. So it was a real statement of reconciliation as well, you know, like finding common ground and dialoguing about that, and then coming together as one special thing, you know. And I think I often think, I'm really proud of what that piece did, you know. That was a unique sort of statement of reconciliation. So but it was fabulous working with Mick too. And I remember when we recorded it, Mick said, "Oh, I've broken my B didge." so we had to transpose everything.
Oh no!
He said, "Oh, I bought my C sharp one." It was like, oh okay.
Wow.
Anyway, it worked out okay.
Sure did. Now, going on with that, the process of, you know, getting new works and whatnot, and I guess we'll make this a two-part question because you being a composer in residence for the ensemble as well. In terms of commissioning works for the ensemble, firstly, approaching composers from outside the group, how would you go about the process of approaching a composer? Would you like just ask them, or would it be again just sort of having worked with someone in the past and just go, how, you know, I really like this person's music, would you do that? And also in terms of yourself and Martin writing for the group, how would you sort of go about constructing a piece? Because I know that both of your works were quite tailored to the individuals of the ensemble, so it will sort of bring out the musical personalities, shall we say, of each member of the group.
Okay, so our very first Continuum album
Yep.
It was basically just a call out. Who wants to write for us? And we'll record it and put it on a CD. It was basically that.
Really?
And then all these pieces came in, you know. It was fabulous. And we found pieces too, like to play as well. But it was basically a call out, and we workshop things, and I don't know if, I know it's a while back now, but I'm not sure if everything got on there on that CD, but that was basically, and composers are looking for opportunities, you know, they're always looking for a good group to play their music. So you know, who's going to say no to that, you know? And I remember even Paul Stanhope's wonderful quartet that he wrote for Occam's Razor. That one he did it for Nix, you know, and because he wanted to write for a saxophone quartet. And you know, so you just never know. If you don't ask people, you don't know what the things are. So it was basically either somebody we might have worked with before, and you had some sort of relationship there, but then otherwise it was just asking, being brazen and asking, would you write for us? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what about writing for the group? How would you sort of go about that, I guess? I think well, I can talk for myself. It was very much thinking about the people that were in the group and their personalities, and then kind of tailoring it for that. My little quartet Tundra that I wrote, it was probably like one of the first pieces I ever wrote. And you know, it came out of exploring just one multiphonic. That was how the piece sort of evolved itself. And also inspired by a very large landscape. So it was kind of those two things. But it was very much just looking at what the others, their personalities, and kind of, you know, it's a nice thing to do, really, isn't it? And, you know, just to go, oh, I'll ask Jim to do that, and did that nasty thing to Jim. But it's a lovely thing to do, to write for each other. And that little piece Tundra was kind of the start of the group really exploring improvisation. So that was so I kind of guided them a lot. I mean, Martin didn't need much, but some, you know, Jim and Jared weren't quite so comfortable with that at the time. They are now, of course, but that's sort of where that came from, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool. Yeah, no, it's just, I'm curious because members of the Nexus are actually starting to write works for the group. Michael has started to take upon himself writing a few works, and yeah, it's sort of interesting. Like, he sort of tailors each part to each person and their personalities, and you know, we're quite eccentric in the Nexus Quartet, as you know. Some different characters in there, so yeah. It's reflected in those works.
Yes, rich possibilities. Yeah.
Okay, no, great. Now, with Continuum, you guys played a whole heap, and you know, you were gigging quite a lot, particularly in the early 2000s and the 2010s, and you know, you did some amazing concerts. Are there any particular concert highlights that you have with the group that you can recall, and if so, what made them memorable for you?
Oh, look, you know, just lots of great highlights with Continuum. It was an ensemble that I loved playing with for so long. One gig that we did, I mean, I loved our very first gig, actually, when we launched our CD. That was so fun, because we just did it in this little bookshop in Paddington, and on the second floor, and just heaps of people came, and it was just a really great energy, and we were just getting started, and that was a real thrill. One of the really fantastic gigs that we did was at the Brisbane Powerhouse, and I think this was about 2008 or something like that. And it was Robert Davidson organised this commission called the Six Pack Orchestra, and it was basically 6 composer performer ensembles writing pieces for each other. So it was 6 new works for the 6 ensembles, and they were really eclectic ensembles. Topology was one of them, but there was one with 3 cellos, and then there was one with David Chesworth's ensemble was there, and it was a very, very strange ensemble to write for.
Right.
But that was just the most amazing concert. That doing all those pieces, it was really quite remarkable, and just the venue. I think, like, you have to think like, oh yes, we're doing all this music, but then this venue was supporting new work. How fabulous was that? So the director of Brisbane Powerhouse, he really believed in collaborations. He believed in like new works being done. He believed in taking a risk, and that was, it was just gold for us to have that opportunity. And then as a sidekick, we got to do our own concert, which was just a fantastic experience. And I think the group really grew from being in that fertile sort of environment and just experiencing all those different ensembles from all over the country. It was just great. Yeah, and all our collaborations, I think, are really special for me. And we did a lovely one with Vanessa Tomlinson's group, Clocked Out Percussion.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we did that. That was a really good one. We spent a week at Bundanon workshopping ideas with that. So, but many wonderful experiences and great times playing with, and having good times with beautiful people. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Now, I know I talked a lot about Continuum, but you also have been involved with a couple other very renowned chamber groups, such as the Seymour Group and Sonnegarde Ensemble. Could you tell us a bit about both those groups and a little bit about the musical concept behind those, and just a bit of your experiences with those groups?
Yeah, well, basically dedicated to new music, and I think new Australian music, and also just bringing new music to our listeners as well. So commissioning was a big part of that. With Seymour Group, we did workshopping. We had a wonderful residency in Tassie for 3 years, where we went down twice a year and workshop student composer works and had concerts of those. It was just that was great to work with those young composers and just the ins and outs of writing for strings and woodwinds, and so that was, but basically kind of what Ensemble Offspring does now. That just promoting Australian musicians and Australian work. So that was and again, like Continuum, I was with that ensemble for quite a long time, and just the once again, having the opportunity to play with those people over and over again, and doing all those concerts was it's just very special, I think. And I kind of count those experiences as being the really rewarding ones of my career. I mean, because one has to make a living, but then the special things are very special. Yeah.
As you were saying before, you got your bread and butter gig, and then you got your ones you really put everything into.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Now, just another question for the young players out there, particularly for younger performers looking to branch out into chamber music and setting up their own ensembles. What advice would you give to players looking to set up a chamber group out there, from your experiences that you've learnt being involved in so many wonderful projects?
I think it's like everything has to start little, and you've and it's very much finding those people that you like to play with. That's super important. Having good communication in the group, so that you've all got similar values about where you want the group to go. I think that's really important. So if some people are just kind of, oh yeah, I'll come along and do it, and then some people are like, oh, I really want to do this, and if you don't have that kind of that balance, and that's just been my observation, that some groups just don't really last very long because they don't have that shared sense of purpose. That but it's maybe finding you know, a repertoire angle that you want to do. Like, it doesn't have to be I mean, one player I really admire is Christina Leonard, and the way that she's branched out into Baroque practice on the soprano sax, and I think it's like we've just got to all find our own little spot in the sun, and where we want to explore. I mean, I was always, personally, I was just always interested in doing new things. I always wanted to play new music. I wanted to do stuff that hadn't been done before. I wanted to have a performance practice that was fresh and not having to be prescribed by dead composers, you know. and like, how am I supposed to, you know, I've got to play this in the right style and all that, you know. It's like I must say I don't really operate very well in that way as a musician. I'm probably more like, I prefer to just find my own voice through things, you know, and that was a way that you could do it. So it was just finding that niche, and like Nexus does too. Like, you've had a really amazing journey in terms of like bringing theatre to your concerts, and you know, like, I think Continuum's a start, but then the tradition is getting taken over by other groups, you know. Like, there is a sort of a lineage happening. Yes, I think. Yes. Yeah, you know. Yeah, we were just the start, you know.
Yeah, no, of course.
You guys take it to even more amazing things, you know.
Yeah, no, but Continuum, it certainly has been a benchmark in terms of saxophone quartet here in Australia, and you know, you guys really kicked off something amazing, and you know, the group today still does some amazing projects. I also hear on the quiet there's a few projects to watch out for next year too, sort of pushing the envelope again. So watch your space, and hopefully I'll get another member on here soon. Now, it's interesting you were saying that you find it difficult to sort of work in the constraints of sort of standard repertoire and working in that, because you've worked quite extensively in orchestras where it's pretty much that's what you do a lot of the time. How just I'd be very curious to sort of think about your experiences and thoughts working in the orchestra, because it seems like the polar opposite to what you're really passionate about. And now, I mean, back in the day, I'm sure you were very much into the orchestral stuff, but I'd just be interested sort of how you transitioned from that to the more new music and modern music.
I think when I think about myself when I was, you know, still a student, I was really into, like, things were very avant-garde when I was a student. So and I was really into that. Like, I used to love being part of all those avant-garde performances, and so I was always interested, and I was interested in composing too when I was a student, but it wasn't really something that was encouraged very much back then. And, you know, like, so I think that was, so I always had that within me, you know, but I loved playing in an orchestra, and I really loved the sound of everything when it's all going gangbusters. And you know, when it's good, it's very, very good. Like, it's a wonderful experience, I think, to be part of a shared thing that's so big. And if everyone's just like clicked on the same rails, and it's just this energy and you know, that I don't know, it's just fabulous. But often it's not. And I always really struggled with being told how to play. I mean, that sounds really egotistical, but it wasn't really. It was more like, I want it to go like this, and then this other person is telling me to do it like this. Or I mean, I'm not putting ballet down, but when I had to do a Scheherazade cadenza in time with the ballet dancer steps, you know, it was kind of like, you know, and so I think it was like a, you know, it was a like, and I think too, like, you get, so I played in orchestras for quite a long time, because I was in the opera and then the symphony. And you get to that stage where you're pretty on top of it, you know, and I thought, oh, what's next? And it kind of starts to eat away at you a little bit. And I know some people, they can be in those orchestras for years and years and years, until they drop dead or they leave or whatever, retire. But I couldn't be like that. I've always been a person who just has to move on to new things all the time. Yeah. And financially, I'd be much better off if I'd stayed. But it was really like one spirit. You just had to be true to yourself. And I mean, I loved the opera. Like playing in the opera was fab. When the opera was great, it was amazing. That was amazing too. This whole drama comes together, and it's just the most incredible experience. But in an orchestra, your creativity is very constrained. It's constrained by other people you're playing with. You've got to be in time. You've got to be in tune. You've got a certain amount of creativity in there, but most of the time you've just got to pump it out and just keep that really strict discipline. But though I'm so glad I did that discipline. It was great. It was great for me, like it made me into a really strong player. But at the same time, it's very constrictive. And if you can't kind of be within that mold, and I think of a lot of people left playing in orchestras for that reason. Someone like Ian Cleworth on percussion. That like maybe he had the same. I'm not speaking for him, but eventually people go on and they find their real creative thing that they like to do, I think. Yeah. And for me too, teaching really started to become a bigger part of my life too. It was part of that, wanting to give back some of the things that I'd been lucky to have experienced. So it's kind of like different things. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating.
Hard decisions though. It's hard to walk away. It's a very, very hard decision.
Yeah. And job security, being musician, that's one of those things that, it's like the golden goose and the golden egg. Yep. And it's just really hard to say no. But, you kind of have to go with your gut sometimes,
That's right. Yep. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Now, in terms of just you're going back to the orchestral stuff, or even going into some solo performances, things like that, do you have any particular highlights in terms of performances, either with the orchestra or in a solo context, that again sort of stick out for you? I mean, saxophone specific would be ideal, but it can be a clarinet thing, of course. Just something that you felt like it really resonated with you and sort of has stuck with you to this day in terms of having experience of that and going, wow, that is like a bucket list sort of concert or moment.
Well, I mean, just like dipping into clarinet briefly, I mean, just being in all those Mahler symphonies and, like doing that really great orchestral repertoire was very cool. Rite of Spring, Petrushka. I loved playing Petrushka. Like that was just so exciting. But I got to play the Villa-Lobos concerto with the orchestra when I was there.
Oh, the Fantasia.
That was wow. And that was really cool. And I did I did a few solo things when I was in the orchestra. But that was really great. Getting the soprano chops happening and I think I think just like you just think of a general thing, like when it's good, it's just very good and very exciting, and being on a tour and just playing in some of those great halls, which I did on saxophone and clarinet, the great halls in Europe, and it's just like that's a real buzz to do that, it's yeah.
All right, no, it's fantastic. Now, I mean, it's undeniable that, of course you're a fantastic improviser, but you are also a wonderful interpreter of music. But yeah, going back to the improvisation side of things, you actually went and did some PhD research into this area, and your dissertation entitled Improvisation as the Catalyst for Collaborative Musical Thinking and Composition. Could you maybe, it could be a bit tricky, but maybe try and summarize the gist of your dissertation and why you saw the need to do research in that particular area in music?
I guess I guess when I started my PhD, it was just when I came back from London after doing that year of postgrad work at the Guildhall.
Yep.
And at the Guildhall, we did improvising, we did creative music workshop leading, we did composition, and it was kind of, the PhD was kind of a continuum of what I did in that year, I suppose. And it was like my eyes got opened up. And also at that time in the Guildhall, I also got opened up to kind of the political side of music, like I guess it sounds a bit socialist, I suppose, but it was kind of, but you know, like looking at orchestral players, and basically they're still dressed up in the same things as they were in the 18th century, you know, with the you know, the tails and bow tie and everything, you know, still servants, you know, and it was kind of like it was sort of that, and a lot of those there were quite sort of radical musicians in London at the time that were really huge, like free improvisation was really big at that time. And there was kind of a lot of political stuff, like it was a rebellion against the classical kind of
the
system,
establishment, yeah,
the hierarchy. So it was a little bit this kind of rebellion in there as well, and I sort of absorbed a lot of that in my time there, because when I did that course, I fairly recently left the orchestra, and I was pretty bitter and disillusioned after it. I was not in a good place, like it was, you know, and it kind of it gave me, well, the Guildhall really set me off in new possibilities. Like I just kind of realized all these new possibilities, and also having the confidence in one's own ability to lead a project. And I think, like, as a trained classical musician, you're not really given those opportunities. Well, I certainly wasn't anyway. Maybe it's a bit different now, although I'm not sure if it is, but you're still very constrained in the way you see your creativity. So my PhD was just a continuum on of that, and that kind of rebellion. And what happened with that was I had 5 different groups that I worked with. So they were, and I had, and once again, it was kind of thinking, what can I want to do? How can I fund this? So it was like putting my business brain on, and how can I get the uni to help me do this, you know? Early career research grant, brilliant. Okay. So it's kind of like, and this is my advice for PhDs if you're going to do them, like you've really got to follow something that's very relevant to what you want to do, like as a performer, because otherwise it's just a heck of a lot of work for, you know. But anyway, so it was this little research, and basically it was free improvisation, but constrained by musical concepts. So there were a list of tasks that we did, and I recorded everything, and then we did a final session, which then became the music that was in my PhD, which I analysed and talked about. And at that time too, I was having composition lessons with Richard Vella, and which just totally opened up my brain to music and how it's constructed, and how to talk about music. Because I think one of the things that's really hard when you're a performer is you have a lot of tacit knowledge inside yourself, but it's really hard to say why you think something should go like blah blah blah. And so my PhD was partly to explore all the questions that I had about music as a performer, and to find reasons for it, to find explanations for why it felt like a free improvisation should just rest a little bit and then go on and do something else, you know. And it was very much looking at like creating a shared language between each little group. It was and everyone was they were all very, very different groups, and they certainly weren't all classical performers. So it was looking at that, and I also explored recording technologies in the studio as well. So I went to the same studio, and so then it became like a bit of a partnership with the recording engineer who suggested different ways of doing things. So when I did the project with Amanda Stewart, who's a vocal improviser and free thinker and amazing woman, but we did things where we set it up so that I could like hear them. I had my saxophone mic'd up so that I could like, when she improvised, she has 2 stereo microphones, and she like dives between the two microphones and like actively pans her sound in space, you know. And so I did similar thing, like I explored that idea on my saxophone, and you know, just having the cans on, but not being able to hear myself at all, but only hearing what was going into the microphones, and like really feeling the edge of each microphone field, you know, and wow. So it was really it was just totally exploring things and trying to find answers for all those questions that I had about music. So that was it basically. It was wow. It was a really great project, and it kind of went into quite a, you know, like a philosophical thing about music, about sound. So a lot of exploring the nature of sound, and exploring the you know, that in a real time way that you could it wasn't, you know, like a mental thing. It was like a real physical, like hands-on thing.
It's like an experience, not just an intellectual thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was a very, very cool opportunity to have that to do, and like it really put me out on a limb too, because I, you know, up until that time I'd never led any kind of project like that, you know, and I guess that was what really formed the base work for what we would go on to do in Continuum Sax. And so looking at collaboration, looking at improvisation, and that idea of creating a shared language in a group, which I find, you know, it's really fascinating how it's a beautiful conversation. Yeah.
Now, did you happen to find any outcomes or conclusions to your research in terms of what could be done to help young musicians sort of become a bit more confident and aware of this approach to music and understanding what it is they're doing in their improvisations?
I think one really important person that sort of hit me like a, you know, a rock in the middle of my head, basically, you know, and it was going to hear Robert Dick play, Robert Dick, the flutist. So he's a real exponent of free improvisation, and he's just saying, you know, what music do you have inside you? You know, what is your music? You know, and it's like and I think it's like a question we can ask ourselves all the time. It's like, and at different times it's going to be something different, but I think what he said, you know, you've got 60 seconds is the time frame. What are you going to fill it with? You know, what's your palette of sounds? What are you going to use to fill it with? And so I think that he was probably like a challenge, you know, to rise up to. But I think for all musicians, like finding some kind of way through improvising is just so important, and because it allows you to, it gives you the space to explore yourself, your instrument, your relationship with the instrument, and to really listen. I think listening is the great thing that comes from improvising, like just being there in the moment, just like, and then it's like taking that knowledge that you get and then putting that into the works that you might be performing to, if you're doing notated works, like you know, bringing that being in the moment, spontaneity, creative thinking, you know, into whatever you're playing, I think is kind of the goal. Yeah. But I've never been I kind of found my own language in as an improviser, and it's probably Amanda Stewart said it's kind of like a compositional improvisation that I do. She reckoned it because I'll take a little idea and I'll pull it apart and then, you know, like the piece, or it's very organic, and my composition style is kind of similar to that. Like it'll start from, I've never been one to have like a big, you know, 10 minutes and I'm going to do this and this here, and you know, like it'll just start from like one little kernel of something, and it'll just grow out from that. And so kind of looking backwards and forwards as you go is a very to find relationships between things, and it's amazing how your mind really creates those relationships. I've never been more amazed by anything. It's great.
Wow. Now, in terms of the improvisation process itself, I'd love to pick your brain on this, and you know, we could talk all night about it, but I'll just would love to just know a couple of things about getting started, or you know, developing this skill of improvising for particularly you know, classical musicians or musicians who not necessarily have experienced improvising and whatnot. Now, obviously, it's not quite the same as a jazz improvisation. Could you sort of distinguish the difference between this free improvisation, and jazz improvisation, like in terms of the approach, firstly?
Yeah. So I guess I could. Well, I would say it's not idiomatic. So you're not being a jazz player. You're not being totally free. But you're free to dip into different influences. So I think that probably describes what my approach has been. But I mean, I've done jazz improvisation, but it was never really. It didn't kind of work for me. Like I didn't feel my voice. Like it felt to me I was still playing classical music in a way. Like it's yeah. But I think the way to get into it is maybe even like finding music you really like listening to and just playing along with it, and finding that can be a nice way to just even start to get into that kind of free thing. It depends on your background. I mean, when I did my improvisation course at AIM, I was working with students that had contemporary music backgrounds, and then there was the classical ones, and all the other ones in between. So it was the contemporary students found it quite hard to have that sort of freedom in you know, like they were constrained in their own ways, and then the classical ones were often quite scared of doing anything. So it's very it's just taking that like taking that fear and kind of working with it and overcoming it, because oftentimes that's really good for performing too. You know, it's like you've just got to go across that field screaming your head off, you know,
and go in front of an audience and
with your eyes closed, scring your head off, and you know, it's sort of that feeling. But I often think, you know, like you have an intention to try some improvisation. Just start with one note, and see how many parameters you can discover within one note, and make it a 30-second little piece about one note. And in that way, you know, and if you record like 10 improvisations around that way and you listen back to them, you can kind of start to see relationships with things. And that's kind of the interesting bit, you know, that like just going back and looking at it, listening back after a few days, when you've forgotten that you did it, you know. But I think, but in terms of like relating it back to your own playing, like say you were doing that one note improvisation, and you were just really exploring all the ways of like attacking a note, and looking at, like, you know, you may be experimenting with the idea of a sound envelope, and how would you, and like so technically it's a fantastic way to work to get more expression into your playing. You know, not just the notes tongued or not tongued, or kind of things in between, but it's like looking at real nuance, subtlety and color in what you're doing. I think that, so it's kind of like having this live dialogue with yourself and your imagination, and allowing yourself to have that imagination, you know, that because when, you know, working with sound, like it's so immediate, and I think that's what's fantastic about playing the saxophone, because it can do so many different sounds. Like it's just, you know, the expressive possibilities on a saxophone are just extraordinary, you know. And so I think it's like just getting in on that nitty gritty, and then, you know, the stuff that you do with your own imagination, you take it to whatever else you're doing, and gradually there's kind of this real dialogue with yourself about your own musicianship and your imagination, and that's when things really get very interesting. And I think that's what engages me with music, you know. And it's like coming back to those same pieces again, but with fresh eyes, you know. And even so, you've got this horrible little passage you're trying to get your fingers around, and you know, making up an improvisation around that. So, you know, say if it's, you know, like fourths, oh, terrible. And, you know, just doing if it's something like out of eBay or whatever, and you can just make up, you know, find ways of improvising within that, rather than, you know, the usual kind of slow practice, and then go back to the slow practice, you know, but sort of keep things creative and fresh, and don't get bored.
All right. Well, look, I think you've answered my next question very much.
Oh, okay.
No, that's great though. But I'll just make sure I've got it right. Is you know, obviously you feel that having the ability and experience, and, you know, working and developing those improvisation skills is a crucial part for any musician, whatever discipline they're in. And, you know, by what you're describing, and, you know, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it gives you another layer, another dimension to your playing, because you're developing those analytical skills and understanding, you know, the nuance of what you're doing, and then, you know, taking that back into interpreting written music. It just takes it to a whole other level.
I think that's absolutely right. Like, yeah, summed it up perfectly there, Nathan.
That's all right. I was paying attention. There's always a quiz.
Very good. 10 out of 10.
Okay. Now, talking about your composition, again, we sort of touched a bit on this stuff and your compositional process, how, you know, you say yourself it's quite an organic thing, and, you know, an improviser, composer sort of exploring ideas and having that organic approach to how it would develop. But just in terms of your composition, you've written heaps of music, and you know, there's a lot of wonderful music out there that you perform, not only with Continuum, but also the Hourglass Ensemble, the Serious Chamber Ensemble. A colleague of mine at work, Ian, says hello, by the way, and of course, you know, you're the composer of residence at the International Grammar School.
Oh, I'm
Sydney.
not there anymore.
Oh, not anymore. Sorry. I just got that off your website. So.
That's all right. Sorry, it's out of date.
Oh, okay, no worries.
But
you know, beside the point, like, you have a wealth of experience writing music, and, you know, your works are performed all over Australia and across the world. But how did you first get into composing? You've said you had always had an interest in it, and you wanted to explore it, but it wasn't really in those early days. It wasn't something that was encouraged initially.
I think composing saved my life. Actually, it saved my life as a musician.
Wow.
Because I think when you take the time to figure out how music works and how it's put together, and doing it yourself, I think it awakened me to like a whole new world of music, and I think that's what's kept me going in music. Like, when you're doing something for so long, you've got to, and the good thing about music is you can branch off into different directions. That's the thing about it, and you can reskill yourself in different areas. And so, you know, I came to music sort of halfway through my, you know, composition halfway through my career, really. Probably a bit late to be even doing composition, but heck, you know, if you like doing it, just do it, you know. And but I think it's just that it's it's just like there's so much in music to know, and I think when you understand, like just even looking at, you know, even Beethoven, and how amazing he was at just manipulating material, like taking, you know, like a little 4-note idea and then creating a whole structure around that little idea, you know, and sort of understanding how these kind of things work, or even understanding, you know, like the power of a cadence, and how, and the energy of music to keep going, or it wants to rest for whatever reason, and like as a performer then realizing that energy, you know, and I think composition has really given me a huge shot in the arm, and it's still some, and I'm still like studying scores. I'm still being a total nerd. You know, it's just I'm still like exploring chords and sonorities, and even going back to just like traditional sounds, you know, and kind of rediscovering them in my own way, you know. And it's a totally wonderful process, I think. But I did start off, my first pieces were they were basically worked out on my clarinet or my saxophone. I just sat there and figured them out and then wrote it down, you know. And but now I probably don't do that as much now. Okay. But I still work out stuff on paper, but then I'll just kind of work between the computer and just score paper. I like paper and pencil. It's good, yeah, but I'm old-fashioned. Yeah, old school. Yeah, yeah.
No, nothing wrong with that at all. And everyone has their own way of doing it, so whatever works is.
Yeah, but I think though, like, it's just right. It's just having that freedom to like make a sketch and make a shape of a sound, or, you know, it's kind of like very fluid, which I haven't figured out how you can make Sibelius fluid in that way. I don't know, because I'll tend to write stuff without bylines, or, you know, and I'll figure out what meter it's in when it's, you know, when it's gone a little while. I won't start off with 3/8 or whatever and, you know, squash it into whatever that is. You know, I'll look at what I've written and what is it saying to me, you know. And yeah.
Now, maybe you could tell us about some of your recent commissions and compositions. Maybe just if you could maybe highlight a couple and maybe talk about the concept behind them and the I guess the ideas and the compositional processes.
I'll talk about, I seem to have this thing with the flute, like there's just about a whole CD of flute music just about now, I think. Yeah. I had this wonderful relationship with Hourglass, and my last piece with them was a flute concerto for Eva to play, Eva Kowalski, which was absolutely fabulous. And that was a really great challenge to do that. But one of my most recent really cool experience was last year. I got to go on this trip called Composing in the Wilderness, and to think of doing that now this year, like I did this just over a year ago, and so it involved going to Alaska, hanging out in Denali National Park with 8 other composers, and writing music about our experience there. So it was unplugged time, no phones, no electricity, no anything, you know, just camping out at a remote field station, and going out each day with different specialists from the park. So one day we went out with a biologist, another time was with a park historian, a social historian.
Wow.
So it was just going out and getting all these different like interpretations of the landscape, if you like. So these kind of layers of understanding, Indigenous interpretations, the wild Alaskans that live there, pretty wild. You know, these people that still, you know, a subsistence, they're living off the land basically.
Oh, wow.
which is truly amazing. They're very tough. Well,
it gets pretty cold there, I hear.
It's very like -50. Yeah, it's pretty cold. So but when we went there, they had terrible wildfires, and it was like I got to Fairbanks and I could hardly breathe, and you couldn't see anything. Like the smoke was, you know, portent of our last black summer, our very tragic black summer that we had. And so the first little bit of our field trip, we couldn't actually see any mountains or anything very much, and so we're just like kind of looking on the ground at all the little flowers and stuff like that. But the thing that really really grabbed me was like the braided rivers. And when you went up a little bit higher and you looked down, it was this fantastic sort of pattern that these rivers made. And so part of this composing in the wilderness was we had to write a piece in 2 days after the 5 days, and then it was performed at the Fairbanks Summer Music Festival. And so my idea for that piece was about the braided rivers and about time, and how rivers passed through history, passed through time, and you know, it's like that was, and so other people had inspirations about the smoke, and then gradually things being revealed, and that was a really cool concept. So that was, and I got given an ensemble to write for, so that was another flute piece, violin and cello, and that was a very, very fun project to write a little 5-minute piece just within that, you know, having 2 days to do it. And
wow.
it was intense, but you know, like your brain was just so cleaned out from just being out there in nature that it's some, yeah, I don't know if I could sit and do it here at home, but it was all very, everyone did it. It was all very possible, you know, in that landscape. Yeah. Yeah. But it's like, you know, finding great opportunities that you can make use of, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. In terms of performers looking to delve into composition, do you have any I mean you might have already answered this in terms of, you know, exploring improvisation or free improvisation and sort of developing those skills in terms of exploring ideas and whatnot, but are there any additional things that you could suggest to people wanting to get into composition, particularly, you know, after, you know, being performers, or you know, looking to, you know, add another skill set to their existing skills?
I think there are a lot of people already doing that, actually, and they're finding their own music. I think there's quite a few already. I think it's like find the style that interests you, explore, find some people to explore with you, and see what happens, I reckon. but I do think like having an opportunity to make your own thing is super important for all performers. If you're really serious about being performing, and I think just finding, and you do this yourself, you know, that's, yep. So, but there's lots of people. I think there's already lots of performers, and maybe, you know, within COVID, there's new opportunities that one can find, like the concert performance might not be necessarily, you know, in a hall anymore. It's going to be different. Yeah, for
sure. Now, again, we've talked about this, so you know, if you've got anything else to add, great, but if not, that's totally fine. But being a interpreter and preparing music, particularly work that's been written by another composer, or, you know, a sort of a standard work, shall we say, your dual identity as a composer and a performer, does that have an impact on your approach in interpreting someone else's music? Like, does that, again, I think you've answered this in terms of, like, it gives you sort of that additional layer in terms of how you would approach a piece of music.
Oh, especially for new pieces, I think, because you can maybe appreciate the processes that the composer did to arrive at whatever he or she wrote. So that can give you some good insights about how to write a new piece. But I think, I think just thinking about music with that composer's hat on and a performer's hat on, I think it's, I think I spoke about it quite a bit already. But for sure, absolutely, it's a very rewarding way to think about. Like, it's finding that creativity, you know, and like improvisation is is a kind of continuum in itself, you know, like even when you're playing a notated piece, there's an element of improvisation in it, you know, because the composer can't write everything that he or she wants in the music, you know. So there's improvisation in Mozart and Brahms as much as there is in Chelsea, or
yeah. I think I was back in my honours days when I was studying with you. I was reading some articles by Jean-Marie Londex, and he actually had this thing about the 3 levels of interpretation. And you know, the first step would be, you know, obviously learn the dots, of course, and be true to what's written on the page. And the second step, which was quite a fascinating one, was talking about his understanding what's happening with the piece and the composer, not just the notes itself, but you know, the composer and what was happening at that time, and just try and, you know, get your head around, you know, the music on that level. And you know, improvisation is another thing as well, just sort of more of that nuance as well. So I think, you know, anything that people do, it's certainly important to have, you know, that as deep an understanding as you can to, you know, truly convey, you know, an interpretation, but something that's yours but is true to what's on the score, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's with established repertoire, you've always got to be very respectful of where it came from. I totally agree with that, you know, because but it is also finding your own creative voice within that too, I think. I remember, I mean, I know this is a clarinet thing, but the last time I played the Mozart clarinet concerto, which is, you know, like it's played by everybody, it's been recorded a million times, and but you know, like this time when I came to the piece, which I knew since I was a student, really, it was like looking at, you know, what kind of angle can I explore within this piece, and I remember thinking at the time, okay, I'm going to explore what Mozart did with meter in this kind of interpretation of it that I'm developing, and that was actually really interesting because there were all sorts of subtleties that you could bring out in the piece, and still be kind of, you know, faithful to the style and everything. But it's just looking at the framework of what you're working with, and then looking at the possibilities within that framework, and being a bit lateral about it too, I think sometimes. Because often like when I've been to concerts and you go just like a historical performance ensemble, and sometimes like they're the most exciting performances you'll hear of that repertoire. And I think sometimes it's because that those performers really drill down into the style and then recreate it, like in the very best practice. It's recreated as something new and fresh again. And I think that's, you know, we can all aspire to that. You know, that's what jewels can we find that maybe no one else has found? You know, and exactly. It's a challenge. It's fun.
Now, as you were saying before, like we talked a lot about your performing and your composing and improvising, but you're also at the start you were talking about, you know, your love for teaching, and you're a phenomenal teacher. I had the good fortune to learn off you for a number of years, and you know, I certainly, you know, it's what I learned from you is something to this day is still a lot of things that I still use and utilize in my own playing. And you've taught, you know, at Newcastle Conservatorium, at the Sydney Conservatorium on saxophone and clarinet. I'd love to sort of talk about your experiences as a teacher there, and particularly one thing I want to look at is like from a historical perspective is actually your time there in terms of like the colleagues that you worked with and what the what do you call it? Sorry, English fail. It's been a long day. Sorry, Marge. Like the group of students and that kind of community, what it was like and how it sort of developed and progressed during your time at these institutions.
I think that's an interesting question. You know, because I think like there's definitely in an institution and like it happened at Sydney Con as well, you know, with you guys, with you and Ben and Andrew and you know, just like that was an extraordinary year, you know, that when those years when you guys were there, it was incredible. Like, so, you know, the standard was so fabulous and you did all these amazing things. And definitely like there is that element of in an institution of like I remember when I first started at Newcastle, there were just some extraordinary talents there, you know, and I had this wonderful teaching portfolio, you know, that of wonderful students that I worked with, and then, but I think like things have really changed now. Well, they've really changed at Newcastle a lot. Yeah. But when I was there, things really changed when Richard Vella took over the professorship of the school, and it became the repertoire became much more diverse, and it suited me. It suited me fine because I was really comfortable, you know, like I liked doing that. That was you know, doing some different things. Yeah. But I think that I think sort of the whole classical thing has become more niche, and there's a lot more things have come in to take its place, and the music scene generally, and especially stylistically, is very fragmented at the moment. Like yeah, I mean, you can pull lots of analogies, you know, with things, with society, in that way, but it's like things have got more fragmented and more niche, and it's quite a different feeling, you know. Everything feels really different to what it used to, but I think like I think maybe Sydney Con hasn't changed so much as Newcastle did when I was there, but definitely like, you know, improvisation became more important. People like exploring other genres, getting other skills, and look, that's so. I mean, if you want to get on, you've got to have a very broad suite of skills, you know, to be a musician in Australia, because it's really still quite a small scene, you know, compared to other places, and the more things you can do, the better, you know, as far as I can see. The more instruments you can play, and the different more styles you can do, and you know, that's really important. So it's about equipping musicians for those roles, I think, and it's really important for it not to be too narrow. So I don't know if I can quite put a timeline, but I think definitely, well, at Newcastle things really opened up a lot there, and it became very interesting, you know, and I think you know, that diversity in the student body led to some very, you know, interesting kind of cross-pollinations with the other students, that was very rewarding. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no, it's just interesting because I know, like as I said, I studied with you in my undergraduate, and being a classical saxophone at that time in the early 2000s, it was kind of, we were kind of put in the corner a little bit, because the classical degree was primarily to train musicians to be orchestral musicians, and that was essentially the way it was designed. And for us, because we're kind of the musical outcasts at the time, we kind of had to, you know, find our own things and develop our own things, and that's where improvisation and chamber music, and this is just my perception of my time there, sort of happened. And I feel like, that sort of now sort of bled onto other instruments and disciplines, and you're spot on, like that the whole course has sort of evolved a little bit more to be a bit more diversified in the different types of experiences that you get.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. No, now about your teaching, now I know you as a teacher, and you know, I had a few years learning off you, and it was great, but I'd love to hear how you would describe your teaching philosophy.
Well, I'm very much about getting students to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my underpinning, is support, mentoring, and helping students to find whatever that potential is, you know. And I mean, I loved working with great students like yourself, you know, and who's, you know, like you guys are, you know, you play so beautifully, you know, it's just fabulous. It's just, but I also liked working with the strugglers a little bit, you know, and I think it's just giving that confidence, and when I'd been, like, it was a lot after I'd been working in composition for a bit, it was actually a lot easier to talk about music with students as well, because you could really genuinely find handles for the students to hold on to. And I used to lead my students in Newcastle just through all this crazy repertoire, and they would love it, you know, that like they were looking out for more. And then, I think even one of mine did the Denisov Sonata, you know. It's just like, yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think it's just opening eyes and possibilities, and being able to talk about music in a way that's exciting for someone else to take away. And I don't know how I do it really.
Sorry,
but
it's a bit of a can of worms, that one, because
it's
hard because everyone's different in how they approach it and personalities. But
but I think it's such a gift and a privilege to work with people in that way, because, you know, if you're even, I mean, it doesn't have to be one-on-one, it can be just in a chamber music group, but just having that opportunity to be someone who's looked out for them in their lives, you know, because you know, you're pretty young when you come to uni. A lot of students are really young, and you know that you're kind of a person, and especially at university, where a lot of the time the experience can be quite impersonal, and you're there as kind of like, you know, number one support for a student, and in many ways, you know, and I think just helping them to be the best they can possibly can, and to excite them about music, you know, to just make them, you know, want to do it. That's all it is. Yeah.
Now, if there, you probably answered this, but again, I'll just ask it just to see maybe if there's something to add. If there was one thing that you wanted your students to take away from lessons with you, what would it be?
Oh, I'd want to see them with like a shining light in their eyes, and going away feeling confident that they can practice whatever we were doing, you know. Nice. And that might have been like drilling down into some little technical thing, but then suddenly they realised, oh, that's how that works, you know. And it's just like, oh, you know, it's the light bulb. That's what I live for. It's a light bulb.
Nice. Now, COVID-19. It's. I think everyone's sick of hearing those two words, COVID-19. It's affected all of us in our industry, in terms of, you know, performance, teaching, musical output. Like it's you know, almost to the point of decimating our industry. But in terms for you, how has it impacted your music making, and what are some things that you've learnt and adapted to get you through this difficult time?
Well, it impacted me pretty bad, actually, because like all my work just went. So apart from doing a bit of Zoom teaching, and it also coincided with relocating to a new place, which is a disaster. So it's just it's probably meant a bit of early retirement, actually, in the truth of it. But I think I mean, for me, I've just kept composing, and I was lucky to I'm actually collaborating on an opera about Percy Granger.
Really?
He's my hero. Wow. so I'm working with two other composers, and we've got one act done, and it's going to be workshopped at Sydney Con next January, and they're going to film it, I think, because of COVID. Yeah. So I've been doing that, and that's been that was really good to get that opportunity, and they're local, they're Victorian composers. So so I'm been working on that. That's very interesting, and I've just been playing a bit, composing other stuff, just doing like some exercises, you know, like I think it's been a very, and riding my bike. Yeah, I ride my bicycle. It's social distance.
Yeah, I think particularly for you in Victoria, it's been very important to get some outdoor time as much as you can.
Yes, I know. And there's been this really cool thing around here where the folks in Melbourne, it's called burbing, and you ride your bike around every single street in a suburb.
Yeah.
And one guy, like he did like 20,000 kilometers or something ridiculous.
Really?
He was riding all around Brunswick or something. and then you have the Strava map of it, and it looks like this little sculpture, you know, this little maze of all these little roads.
So doing pictures with the GPS. Wow.
So people have been doing crazy things like that, and but it's been a pretty weird year, Nathan, and I just hope they get a vaccine soon and we can get our music industry. It's been very sad to see colleagues losing their jobs and people, you know, like it's been pretty horrible. I nearly said something I shouldn't have been, but anyway. Yeah. But I think I mean, maybe there will be the silver lining thing. And you know what, I've enjoyed listening to things that I haven't been able to listen to because I'm not in the same state. But you know, because it's been online, I've been able to catch up with some things that are going on, and certainly you know, there's been some good initiatives for live music in Victoria.
Yep.
That have been supported by the government. But I think, but you know what? I think we realise that we really love going to those things, and we will go in droves when we can.
Yeah, I think people are certainly missing going to concerts.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, missing it. Missing going to the art gallery, missing going to concerts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, this is probably a bit of a tough question, but how would you like to see the music scene here in Australia in a post-COVID world? Do you think there's something that can be sustained with the online platform, or should it go back to the way it was before, or is it going to be like a conglomerate of the two? Or, I mean, what would you sort of like to see happen?
Well, I actually think there's some very interesting experiments going on with kind of the online platform and then live as well. And like, in a way, I think it could lead to maybe a bigger audience in a way, you know, especially if there's a concert in, like, say you guys were playing at Camelot, and I could get a video, I could get a ticket to listen to you, and I could listen to it here where I'm living now, you know, like those kinds of things. Like, I think there are those possibilities. But maybe there's other ways of performing. There must be other things, you know, that other ways. But I have seen like there's a famous music club in St Kilda that's been doing live performances, and you just pay $10 or something to go and listen to it, and they have some like really legend acts on, you know. Wow. That, like, it's and they've just been doing it every week for the whole of COVID, you know, and supporting the artists and supporting certainly like I'm not sure what's happening in Sydney, but institutions like Melbourne Recital Hall has been really supporting artists as well, to do concerts. So I think, I mean, I wish I could see a way out of it that was sorry, but maybe it will be it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we're all very clever and very creative, and how we can kind of pivot ourselves around the opportunities that might come up. I think we've just got to be really flexible and dynamic about how we seize any opportunities that come along, you know. Yeah. But it's challenging. Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. Whatever direction things go, it's going to be an uphill battle, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I do think that people will want to go to things like when we can. I think we haven't known how much we would miss things until we didn't have them, you know. And
true.
I think like our friends and family, and
Yeah.
you know, like, and being able to just go to the pub and listen to some music, you know,
Yeah.
like just those simple things we all just took for granted, and maybe that it'll really, but I mean, the fact that no international artists can come in, that's got to be good.
Yeah, it gives
Yeah,
the local artists a bit of a
yeah,
chance.
yeah. I'm just hoping that they'll, you know, that there will be sort of more opportunities as we're able to get out a lot more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. No, certainly. Today I did my first concert for an audience in many months. Like,
Wow.
real. I've done some streaming concerts. The first time I had an audience,
Mm.
albeit there was only a capacity for 4 people in the room. But we did do the streaming as well, and it's just like, from a musician's perspective, even just having that small amount of people there for the first time in so many months, like playing in front of cameras and sound operators, is nerve-wracking enough. But you're just having that sort of contact with someone, you miss that as a performer, and I just didn't
Yeah,
realize how much you'd miss that. So
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you can, you know, when you've got a great audience there, you can just feel them. You know, you can feel the energy,
yeah.
and you know, that two-way rapport thing. And yeah, I'm not sure how you can get that online
Oh,
on Zoom.
they were very keen. They were very keen. Let's put it that way. And as I said, it was a very intimate performance. But look, it's great just to have people there who, you know, just even, you know, people applauding at the end of a piece is, you know, something I've missed, because it just, you stand there awkwardly on those streaming concerts, and it's just sort of, hopefully someone's out there on the other end.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, good luck with it all. I'm so good. Yeah, my sister plays the drums, and she's had a few gigs. So
Oh, nice.
yeah. So it's good.
Yeah, it's starting to get there.
Yeah.
Now, we're coming to the tail end of our interview, and again, thanks so much for your time, Marge.
Okay.
But I've got just 2 very short questions before we wrap up, and I ask all the guests this one. If you just had 10 minutes to practice, what would you practice and why?
Okay, so it depends what you're wanting to do. So if you've got a hard gig coming up, you'd spend that 10 minutes on that little 2 bars of whatever it is, right? Another chance to like pull it apart, do things slowly. Like, I'm such a creature of habit. Like, I just like doing some scales. Pathetic. Oh God.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I know, and I love doing my long notes. I just love long notes. It's like pathetic, I know, but like when I get my instrument out, I just like to play the lowest note on it, and I like to find my harmonics. Like, that's like getting myself tuned into the instrument, and just really like feeling the sound, and feeling the resonance of the sound, and just getting my breathing working. And you know, that's like, if I just spent 10 minutes doing that, I'm a happy girl, you know, a happy camper. Yeah. But I think 10 minutes, or you could just play for 10 minutes, just play anything, you know. And it depends too, like, if you know, how you can use it to sort of lift your mood a little bit, you know. And if you're feeling a bit sluggish, like, get into some fast stuff. But I think 10 minutes is a lovely time to just focus on a tiny little bit of something that's really, really niggling you, because the more times you come back to that, whatever it is, the stronger it will be, you know.
Cool. All right. Well, Marge, thanks so much for your time this evening. It's absolute pleasure catching up with you again, and just hearing your thoughts and insights. It's amazing just to hear the processes and your journey along the way with getting to where you are now. And it's phenomenal. In terms of keeping an eye out for projects like the Granger Opera and anything else you might have coming up, how do we keep in the loop with that?
If I was better on my website, if I updated that, I'd probably be going well, wouldn't I? Facebook's probably good.
Okay.
Yeah, good old Facebook.
All right. Well, I'll put a link to your website on the video when I upload it, so people can have a look there and sort of have a sticky beak. And it's got your email there as well. So
and contact details.
Have a chat. And you know, if you're in Bendigo, you can pop in and say hello. Have a few visitors now, thankfully. So All right. But again, thank you so much for your time and just everything. And yeah, that's a great, absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Nathan. It's great to see you again too. Yeah,
Likewise.
all the best.
You too, Marge. Thanks.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.